Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BOL Recruiting Show. I'm BamaOnLine publisher Tim Watts, and with me, of course, is Andrew Bone, recruiting editor. Dips his toes into team stuff. Basketball really shines. That's his specialty. So if you got a question on that 13th guy, get him out there. I'm just kidding. Uh, Andrew, it's Friday. Second, we live for this. Second official visitor weekend. A lot of excitement after last weekend. The news just kept rolling in. And we're going to touch on some of that news that developed after. And again, a lot of people expecting commitments on the visit. Old school, me and you used to scramble Saturday and Sunday to break them. Now you got to go home. You got to get your video. You got to get your edit. You got to get Hayes Fawcett on the phone. You got a lot to do to commit now. But still, some news broke from that visit list last week, which was super impressive. But Andrew, this one looks a little bit more impressive on top.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the amount of five stars that are going to be on campus, the amount of top 100 guys, and you got three commits that are going to be in Tuscaloosa to help recruit those guys this weekend. So, I mean, it's another big week. It's going to be a big weekend every week, and until that, really until after that June 20th weekend. So, this is the time for Alabama to really make that impression with these kids. Figure out what's it going to take to get them, and then try to sign a good group. So we saw that last summer, and I don't expect really anything less this summer. I think they're going to have a great class once we, especially once we get to August. It should be a lot more full than it is right now.
Yeah, and I think that this staff has proven they want to do deep evaluations. They want to talk to as many people as possible. They really want the kids to commit and lock it down. And we saw a good percentage of that. I think a lot of people will get hung up on Ty Haywood. We know exactly what happened there, or Caleb Cunningham. But for the majority of those guys that locked it down in the summer, you didn't really hear a whole lot. That's why Bama fans were pretty upset in November. It was super quiet.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at last year's class, and everybody's like, "Oh well, uh, there's no reason to get excited about these
Yeah.
guys who commit because once we get into the season and once we get to signing day, they're all going to flip." Not many of them flip. There's only a few that end up flipping. Most of these guys have gone through this recruiting process for over a year now. They're ready to shut it down. They want to focus on their high school football season. I mean, vast majority enroll early, so they're trying to get all their schoolwork done so that they're able to do that in December. So you don't really see a ton of flips. Obviously, some schools are going to make some last minute offers, but there are also some guys in last year's class who did get those those last minute significant offers and turned them down because they've been solid with Alabama for the last several months.
Yeah, no, we discuss the NIL constantly with the, oh gosh, there's the bag coming. But I mean, Alabama's battle tested at this stage. I mean, Nick Saban went through it. Kalen DeBoer's no rookie. Courtney Morgan does a great job. You set your value. You figure out your budget. You stick to it. And when you're uncomfortable, you let them walk away. And if somebody deserves more money, you give them more money. And we've seen that as well. So 11 official visitors, Andrew, four 5 stars, 3 commitments. Another quarterback. I mean, there's a lot of intrigue in this, but let's talk about the 3 commitments because I feel like we rush through the presents and we really don't talk about him. But Jordan Edmondson, considering he did commit, we felt like a Bama lock, slowed down his commitment at one point, was going to have an announcement, had construction at his school. Nobody believed the school was under construction. It was literally on the website. It was under construction. The place he wanted to have the announcement, wanted to take visits. Everybody panicked. There's a lot of panic, but no one's really enjoyed 5-star defensive back Jordan Edmonds from the state of Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the premier players in the country. Yeah, and this is also a guy that Alabama jumped on very early. He was offered last spring. Came to Tuscaloosa last spring, was offered by the coaching staffs, and he's been recruited now for more than a year. And he knew in the fall where he wanted to go. I remember talking to him after one of the games, and Alabama was the clear-cut favorite. He didn't want to make a decision just yet. He wanted to wait a little while. And, as you alluded to, he was scheduled to make that decision whenever it was, February, waited till March, but he's been solid. I mean, they didn't even have any in-home visits with other schools. They told other schools they weren't going to do that out of respect to Alabama. Now, there were some schools that visited his high school, like Georgia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Miami, all pushing to get him on campus for official visits this month. But he hasn't made a decision in that regard, doesn't really want to. his mom told me, she said, yeah, we want to see kind of how the visit goes to Alabama this weekend before we, really make a decision on shutting it down or not. We have promised these other coaches the last few months that we would take a visit. We're a family of our word, but we're also very solid with Alabama. We feel very comfortable with Mo Linquist, Courtney Morgan, that entire staff. So they got a big visit in Tuscaloosa this weekend, and they changed it. They were originally supposed to be in Tuscaloosa on the 20th. They moved it to the 6th because they knew a lot of top guys were going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend, especially from the state of Georgia, wanted to help recruit. And so I think that's a good sign for Alabama fans.
I mean, you look at him, 6'2" plus, has been to Alabama February, March, April, and now early June, almost 6 days into June. So he's been a frequent visitor, so he knows what he's getting. Like you said, Mo Linquist does a great job. We're going to talk about this. It's going to sound like we're going to sound like a parrot. It's going to be repetitive, but the relationship building with the staff, the kids, it's not us saying, it's the coaches, and it's the coaches at the high school, and the parents. The parents are always talking about these relationships. The kids, staff's very accessible. Get them on the phone, text with them, talk to them. Everything's going right. Couple of guys that should make Alabama fans happy, really happy, defensive line commitments. And we've got Jamarian Matthews, which is kind of like a crazy joke, right? Bama can't get any in-state players. He's in Alabama, he commits, and he moves to Georgia. So it is like a win over, a player in Georgia. But you got him coming in. You got Kamari Johnson from Muscle Shoals. Freddie Roach is from that neck of the woods, having played high school ball there. So you got both these guys coming in, and we're going to consider them in-state talent. And on the defensive line, which has been a priority in this class.
Yeah, no doubt. And we talked about it early on that was going to be a point of emphasis for Alabama's 2026 class. Having 2 D-line commitments heading into the summer, knowing last weekend you had a big group of defensive linemen. You're going to have defensive linemen on campus throughout this month. So, getting Kamari Johnson and Jamarian Matthews back in town this weekend is big because not only are they commitments that are going to be taking their officials, they are commitments that want to help recruit, especially one guy in particular. I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, Xavier Griffin. But Kamari has a couple of officials scheduled after this weekend. Auburn, Ole Miss, Miami's trying to get him in for a visit as well. But he told me, he wants to enjoy the weekend. Could make a decision shortly afterwards as far as if he's going to take official visits elsewhere or not. I think he'll shut it down. Jamarian Matthews is pretty interesting because this is a guy who had 17 sacks during his junior season, moved from Sparkman to Gainesville High School in Georgia, and the moment he committed to Alabama, when they were doing the interview with him, he came out and said, well, here are my other official visit dates that I'm going to take. It wasn't a month or two later where he said, all right, now I'm going to take some officials. He was upfront and honest. He wanted to take officials. He wanted to enjoy it, but he also said, I feel very confident, comfortable with this decision. So he went ahead and committed to Alabama. Great relationship with Freddie Roach there, who offered him back in the fall. We'll see if he still takes visits, though. He took a visit to Auburn last weekend. That was one school that I was, really interested to see how that visit went last weekend because he did, grow up in an Auburn household. He's been to Auburn a few times this spring, but came out after that trip. Said that his commitment was still very solid with Alabama, and it was going to take a lot for him to flip. He didn't come out saying, my commitment's 60%, or I'm still considering
percentages.
So I thought that was a good sign there. So we'll see if he takes some other visits, but good to get that whole group of commitments back in Tuscaloosa this weekend.
Yeah, and LSU and I think FSU's on his schedule for Matthews. The thing about it is like people think I take all these visits, but these are tiresome. I mean, you got a lot of recruiting's hard. You get constant text, constant phone calls, pushing to see what can happen. And again, we're going over the official visitor weekend this weekend. Do us a favor. If you're watching the show and you enjoy it, hit the like and subscribe button. That always shows us how much you guys appreciate the show, and we enjoy doing it. It's the easiest way for us to continue doing it. Andrew, with his awkward thumb, is telling you to give us that that thumbs up. And hey,
this one seems normal.
It does. The other one, that's something happened. That's your right. That's your texting finger, though. So it's got a little more that one's a little more bulky. Also, you can find us at BamaOnLine.com. Andrew and I especially love to discuss recruiting, shows, vacations, anything you can think of, off topic, on topic. We got Blake Byler, we got Charlie Potter covering the team. We also discuss the team. Again, you can get BOL for $1 for the first week and then an annual, or you can do it monthly just to give us a tryout. But would love to have you. And again, after this, towards the end of this show, we're going to talk a little bit more about the visitors from last week. Andrew, we've talked about I tell you, now we talked about the commitments. You know who's on the clock this week in a big way, and I think he relishes, is Christian Robinson, C-Rob. Two of the biggest, not only two of his biggest targets, maybe the two biggest, but two of the biggest on the board from the standpoint of who he's battling, how he's battling them. Xavier Griffin. Let's talk about him a little bit. Recap, how this recruitment's went so far.
Yeah, Xavier Griffin from Gainesville High School. I mean, this is a guy who is originally from Alabama, grew up a Alabama fan. I remember an interview last year where he said no matter where he ends up going, he will always be an Alabama fan. So I thought that was interesting and kind of felt like at the time, all right, this kid's going to Alabama. But then he ends up committing to USC last summer. Was very solid with the Trojans for a while, but Alabama kept pursuing him. They offered him last spring. I think it was actually last February. I mean, one of the first offers for Christian Robinson. So that relationship goes back over a year now. This is going to be actually his first trip back to Tuscaloosa this year. Now, Christian Robinson had two in-home visits with him and his family during the month of May. They visited him in home back in January as well. Griffin decided to reopen his recruitment in the middle of May. USC does not allow its commitments to take visits. Well, Griffin wanted to take visits because there was a lot of schools that were still heavily pursuing him, including Texas, Ohio State, Georgia. There's one other, Florida State. So he decided to reopen his recruitment, set up his visits, eliminated USC completely. Took a visit to Ohio State last weekend. Now he's coming into Tuscaloosa. Mom, grandparents are both going to be there. So a big weekend in T-Town, especially for C-Rob. Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, they don't have any Wolf commitments in this year's class. Last year, able to go into Ohio, still Justin Hill, which was such a significant win there. But can they get somebody out of Georgia in this class? Griffin's certainly one of their top guys, but so is Kamari Brooks out of North Oconee High School in Bogart, Georgia. Now, Bogart's about 10 miles outside of Athens, and he has been to Athens so many times. So a lot of his friends over there last weekend for his official visit. There was a big push for him to make a commitment and not make this trip to Tuscaloosa this weekend. But he shut that down and is going to be in town. So can see Rob.
I think that's the most interesting aspect of this is that why hasn't Brooks committed? And I'm not saying he's not going to Georgia. I know we're still trying to figure this thing out, but why hasn't he committed? Very much a top prospect from Georgia, very close, can ride by the campus, anytime he wants to, has been a frequent visitor. And you said we've confirmed Georgia did not want him to take this visit. And that's just smart business. Try to lock him down. He's a hell of a player, but Christian Robinson has got him and the family coming. So you got to think, Bama, this went from a lock, and it feels a little like Justin Hill because this was a lock, a foregone conclusion, Justin to Ohio State and then Kamari to Georgia. So this is a battle. I don't think anybody would say Georgia didn't have to work if they land him, and Bama certainly did work to keep in this one.
And I think obviously it's going to be really tough. Even if he does commit to Alabama, to be able to hang on for those next 6 months, 5 months, however long it is, until he signs, because he's going to be getting it every single day at his high school, from his friends, from people in the community, obviously from Georgia. That's going to be a recruiting battle, I think, all the way until the end. Can you imagine if like Landon Collins had committed to Alabama, 5 months before? He committed to Alabama over LSU 5 months before he signed. There's a lot of recruitments like that, but there's also a lot of recruitments where we always kind of expected maybe it shifts the other direction over the course of the next few months. And a lot of times those kids end up just sticking, signing, and, never even thought about it again.
Yeah, we've seen guys that want to experience something new. I mean, I've had parents, and I know you have too, say he wants to do against the norm. I mean, you grow up a certain way, you follow a school, you live in a city. Chad Jackson back in the day comes to mind from Hoover, 30 minutes from Tuscaloosa, top target, literally said to us, I just want to experience something new. I've been here my whole life. I'll probably come back here. I want to experience something new. He went to Florida. So we're running into that. Andrew, big target this week, guy we both love a lot, Jaira Edwards, safety. And this is on the heels, and we're going to touch on this a little bit, of Jet Washington visiting last week. We've had some developments with him we'll touch on later in the show. But Jaira's been a top target. Bama really wants, and that they're very picky in that secondary. They're looking to sign guys that come in and play right away. They've done a tremendous job of, developing them and signing them and recruiting the right ones. We're hearing nothing but great things about Dijon Lee and Ivan Taylor. You know what I mean? They put so much effort into that. But here's another guy, offers from across the country, 5-star prospect, early impact guy coming in. So Alabama's, shooting their shot.
I think what's been impressive is Alabama's DB recruiting, because you remember a couple of years ago, Nick Saban retires. Alabama's DB recruiting is not going to be the same. T-Rob ends up leaving, going to Georgia. What's Alabama going to do now that he's gone? They're not going to sit the same quality DBs. And then, boom, last year he signed Dijon Lee and Chuck McDonald, two guys who were wanted by Georgia. So you have two big wins over Georgia last year. Ivan Taylor, you flip him away from Notre Dame. Michigan.
And Notre Dame.
Yeah, two schools. But then you go into this class, Zion Gibson, Jordan Edmonds. So, great start to the year. But the main focus right now, safety. Can Alabama land one of these elite 5-star safeties in this class? Jaira Edwards is going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. This is going to be his second trip to Alabama this year. Was down in Tuscaloosa in March. Coaching staff had 2 in-home visits with him during the spring contact period. Great relationship with Mo Linquist. And I think heading into the summer, we probably felt a little bit better about Jaira than we did with Jet Washington, who we'll talk about in a minute. But I'm interested to see how the weekend goes with Jaira. He's bringing several members of his family down to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Got a few, I wouldn't say former teammates, but a few former St. Francis players on Alabama's team who will be around him throughout the weekend. Cam Howard, Nakai Greenhill. So those guys will probably be recruiting him a little bit. So big weekend with Jaira Edwards, and we'll kind of see where things are. But, as you know, Alabama has made a serious run with him over the course of the last couple months.
Hey, they're going to shoot for the stars. Let's go ahead and talk about Jet. We've already worked it into. We're at the safety position. Jet's seen a shuffling. The deck chairs have shuffled for Jet. We started hearing Tuesday or so that maybe he was moving that decision up a little bit. And then, of course, not all hell broke loose, but a lot of things changed this week as far as his official visit schedule, with the team Alabama feels they're battling the most moved up to this weekend. So decision could be on deck. Fill us in, Andrew.
Yeah, so Jet was in Tuscaloosa last week. Spent a lot of time with the defensive back room, Dijon Lee, Xavier Brown. We saw those guys, heavily recruit him this past weekend. And, it's been an Alabama-Oregon battle for the last few months. And he's mentioned that several times. Was supposed to go to Ohio State this weekend, canceled that trip. I don't think the Buckeyes were really, obviously they're not, but heading into the summer, did not see them as really a top contender in his recruitment. USC took an unofficial visit there this week, but they're not going to get an official visit. He's going to Oregon this weekend for the official. Looks like that's probably going to be the last visit for him before he makes that decision. I think he moved it up because Alabama visit went so well. He wants to see Oregon one final time, make a decision. Probably, I don't know if I'm going to say shortly after, but I think he's going to set a decision date, shortly after that trip. So we'll see how the trip goes to Eugene. They're obviously making a full court press there. They want him very bad. We all know his uncle, the late Kobe Bryant, such a big part of Nike, even till today. So, they'll probably be pushing that aspect on him as well. But great relationship, great job by the Alabama coaching staff to be in the position that they're in this late in the juncture with one of the top safeties in the country.
We were told he's a serious-minded guy. So him moving up, if he's thinking West Coast, South, these are my 2 teams, I don't need to really dawdle with other teams. That makes perfect sense. So again, big news coming in from last weekend. And again, Alabama's done an unbelievable job even being in it. A few more guys let's talk about, Andrew, with this. Let's go to Matt Ponatowski. because I'm not sure, Matt, if I butchered that. There's a lot of vowels in there I have trouble with sometimes. But Matt's coming in, and this guy's very interesting. Here's a quarterback from the Midwest, Alabama. Last week brought in Tamala, who's this week on campus at Iowa State where he's committed. So something's about to happen one way or the other there. If Iowa State locks it down, Alabama will obviously be out. If he decides to come back to Alabama for an official, it's believed he will flip. But they're bringing in this guy, and he's very interesting. I'm talking to Steve Wiltfong about the Ohio native. He doesn't really do football. He just shows up in the spring and plays old school style where you showed up in August after summer and just started playing football. And Andrew's really good at it. So I can't even imagine what he'd be like 24/7 on it.
Yeah, you're kind of interested to see if he's going to. And I know he wants to play both sports in college, football and baseball, but does he end up shifting to just focusing in on one? And how good can he be? How much development will we see with him? Potentially at the quarterback position over the next couple of years. So potentially a guy that wouldn't mind waiting, spending a year or two to develop rather than I got to start right now or I'm going to hit the transfer portal. So, interested to see how his visit goes this weekend. They had Jet Tamala on campus last week. I mean, these are the number 9 and number 10 quarterback recruits in the country. It's not like Alabama's looking for the leftovers, so to say. So this is going to be a big visit weekend for him. Does he potentially jump on board? He's one of only 2 quarterbacks that received an offer during the spring contact period by Alabama, Jet Tamala also included. So these are the 2 guys that Alabama's focused on right now. Can they potentially add one of these guys over the next couple weeks? We'll see. But man, his stats. I mean, you talked about him just going out there and playing football. I mean, 57 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions. I think it was over 4,200 yards passing during his junior season. But not only that, 70% completion rating. So that's pretty impressive. And then Gatorade Player of the Year in football, Gatorade Player of the Year in baseball in the state of Ohio as a junior.
I tell you what these 2 quarterbacks have in common is a big upside and not necessarily expecting to play as true freshmen. Jed will have to adjust to the smaller competition and high school football. Matt would have to be focusing more on football when he gets to that level. But big upside, nice size, big arms, athletic, all the things you did. I think they've done a great job with the quarterback position, which we thought we gave them A+ across the board last year for how they handled it. Let's talk about a few more guys visiting this weekend. Andrew Baum. One that we've been watching and really hearing a lot about is Samuel Utu, who's an offensive lineman. He's a big guy. He kind of fits what they look for. And he's as big as he is. He's under 300 pounds or right around 300 pounds, but he's a massive guy, could project inside or out possibly. Coming in for official. We've been hearing a lot of positive vibes on him lately.
Yeah, he's a little over 300 right now, but he looks good. I think the database is wrong. I think when he came to Tuscaloosa, he was in that 320, but they said he carried that he carried that 320 extremely well. And this is a guy they've recruited for over a year now. Coach Cap, Courtney Morgan, saw him early, really liked him a lot, and they were able to get him on campus back during the spring. Had an in-home visit with him in the spring contact period. And after that visit with him, I mean, he came out and said Alabama's at the front. I mean, they're my leader. And like a week later, he gets a prediction from to Washington after taking an OV up there. So this is a big weekend for Alabama to get him back on campus. And I think they're going to have a really strong shot to land. They only have Chris Booker right now on the offensive line in this class. They would like to get another I'm not going to call Utu an interior player because he can play tackle or he can play guard. But if they can get somebody like him on board, especially before he takes any other visits, I think that would be great. And he's one thing to watch there is does somebody like Tua's parents come back in and be around Polynesian family? They did it last weekend, made a big impression with Malachi Lee and his family. So might see that again this upcoming weekend.
A couple more guys to touch on. I feel like these are a little bit in the long range or to be determined. And look, we've seen Alabama kind of on the outside looking in, and next thing we know, they're coming on Sunday. You and I are prepping for a commitment. We're getting a nugget saying Alabama did a good job. The one thing we feel sure about, they're going to have good times on this trip. But let's touch briefly on Caden Prothrow, 5-star tight end, freaky ability, 6'6", loved his basketball film. He did a lot of good things. And Derek Cooper, who, a lot of people have penciled in for Miami. So two guys are really got to make up some ground possibly, but, two really good players.
Yeah, these weren't guys that just suddenly decided that they were going to visit Alabama over the course of the last month. These are guys that have been recruited by Alabama for more than 7 or 8 months. Even longer than that. I mean, both of them were in Tuscaloosa last fall for football games. They have Alabama obviously high on their list in that top 4 or 5 heading into the summer. Georgia seems like they're going to be tough to beat for Prothrow after missing out on Mark Bowman, but he's going to be in Tuscaloosa, so we'll see how the weekend goes. I mean, as you said, I mean, he's one of the best athletes in the country at the tight end position. Then Derek Cooper, from South Florida, Miami's putting that full court press on him, but Alabama has always kind of considered him in that top 2, running back category for them in this 26 class, along with Xavier, who they've really pushed forward since last year, but. Derek Cooper's in Tuscaloosa with his mom this weekend, and we'll see how the visit goes. But as you said, Miami's going to probably be tough to beat. Ohio State, Georgia also very high on him, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's one thing when you're behind or whatever, or even. This is your chance to figure each other out. We've seen people go to Alabama that wasn't a fit. We've known on a Saturday about official visit, like this guy's not going to fit in here. So there's a lot of, it's almost like a blind date or speed dating to some degree. Although you've already set the precedent with a lot of those guys. Here's a guy we don't talk about nearly enough. That's us included. Is Brian Williams from Florida, wide receiver, 6'4". We know he's not ranked high, but we also know that Notre Dame, Alabama, Florida, Penn State, these are all schools that like him. Alabama likes him a good bit. Now, all the attention goes to Tristan Keys, as it should. He's a good football player. He's taken visits all over. Ken Darby showed up at Alabama. And, of course, Ced Morgan, 5-star, who's taken some visit. But Bryant's coming in, this week. And last year, we talked about this on the phone earlier. Last year, they went and got a guy that was just a guy from New Jersey, didn't have any offers. He's too short. Hey, his competition's not that good. It was Lightseer Brooks. And then they went out and found a big guy, Caleb Cunningham. And then when Caleb flipped, they went and flipped Derek Meadows, another big-time prospect. They could be looking at doing that again this year, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that Brian Williams Jr. He didn't put up gaudy stats during his junior season. I think he had less than 400 yards, so probably didn't jump out on the screen to Alabama, right away. But the coaching staff was interested. They saw some film. 6'4", about 190 pounds. Coach Shep went out and saw him during the spring, and they pushed to get him on campus for an official. Now, this will obviously be the first time meeting with Coach DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, the offensive staff, and the entire staff at Alabama. So they'll need to decide, is this a guy that they're really going to push for after this weekend? We've talked about this before, small wide receiver class. We probably won't see more than 2 wide receivers right now, but obviously that can change. But this is a guy that they're at least interested in. They're going to meet with this weekend. He came in on late Wednesday night, started his official visit on Thursday, should wrap things up by Saturday morning. So we'll have we'll try to have an update there, pretty quickly.
The thing, like people are asking about all the wide receivers. Alabama's not losing a lot of wide receivers. We went through the roster just in our mind, which is not the best place to do research, but we went down, only found one guy that's leaving, that's out of eligibility for Germany. That's going to be a pretty solid room. Now, we know the portal and all that stuff. You don't have to tell us about that. We know that, but they're expecting a lot of guys. One thing, Andrew, I think we definitely need to talk about what you said. They went and saw Brian Williams in person. This staff's big on that. And again, other staffs are big on that, but this Bama staff, I feel like does their best work eyeball to eyeball, and offered Brian Williams soon after. That's not the only wide receiver they've offered recently that they saw. This one's funny. He's a white guy, so that always brings about 700 jokes, lunch pail. But Andrew, this is a football player.
Yeah, Owen Cable from Nashville, Christ Presbyterian. Received an offer on Monday, came down to Tuscaloosa, and they were having a special teams camp, but he did a little workout from the coaching staff, got timed. I think he ran in the, sub 4.5 40. And he's a big kid, 6'3", 190 pounds plus. Had a great junior season, over 900 yards. I think he had over 1,200 yards all purpose, 22 yards per catch. So this is a kid that they seem to like, like we said earlier, small wide receiver class. So kind of have to see how things shake out. But he was just on campus for an unofficial visit. I think the next step would be to bring him down for an official visit if they decide to really move and push for him in this class. But they're definitely one that has moved up the charts, and we'll see how Alabama decides to proceed. Do they bring him in for an official, which we expect, and after that official, do they really push to land his commitment?
He's a good football player. You watch him. He's got speed. And if you're fast, they don't care about. That's the very first thing they're looking for. You see that in the secondary. You see that in the wide receiver core. And to get it on campus, and somebody tweeted out, I don't know if it was his trainer group or who, tweeted out some of the work he did at Alabama to get the offer. He's moving when he's running, has good size, like you said, and looked good in the drill. So, again, I think we're just emphasizing how important it is for these guys to get eyeballs on them. And that's what they did last year with the quarterback position. Andrew, before we get out of here, and again, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. Try us out at BamaOnLine.com. It is a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun over there discussing all kind of things on the round table. So give us a try. It's $1 for the first week. But let us know if you like this content. We appreciate it. We know we took a little hiatus kind of figuring it out, but it's here. It's recruiting time. We're good to go. We'll have team stuff. Again, Charlie Potter and Blake Byler. Andrew, to me, before we get out of here, the last piece of news, to me, the biggest news has been Titan Davis, right? And we came out of that visit last week. Titan Davis, defensive lineman from St. Louis. We came out of that visit last week wondering if he might commit possibly, but we definitely were discussing in our nuggets, which we tend to drop Sunday night or Monday. That's the insider stuff on every recruit that was on campus that we can get information on. We were discussing, would he take visits? Because we were being told he wasn't, but we still wanted to see, because, you still got to call a coaching staff who's been recruiting you and say, I'm not coming, even for a free steak and hot girls. You still got to come for the, I'm not coming to the pool party. It's a tough sell, but he did. He canceled USC. He canceled Penn State. So catch us up where we're at right now on Big Titan.
Yeah, obviously that first weekend was big for a lot of guys, and we saw some guys name Alabama their leader, but we didn't see any commitments. But Titan Davis was one we were really focused on, seeing if he was going to make a decision, because it was his third trip to Alabama since March. Really has strong connection with the coaching staff, likes how they want to use him in their system. I mean, he's 6 foot, almost 6'5", close to 270 pounds right now. Roach has done a really good job there, but he came out, said that he was eliminating Penn State, USC, still going to keep the Michigan visit, because we've seen for the last few months that it was likely going to come down to Alabama and Michigan, kind of like Jet Washington with Alabama and Oregon. Well, Titan, Alabama, Michigan, wants to keep that Michigan visit. Right now, it's set for June the 20th, which is that final weekend before the dead period. I think Michigan's really pushing to keep that weekend alive and not bring him any sooner. So we'll see if he's not going to go there this weekend, but potentially could go there next weekend, and we'll make a decision shortly after. I talked to his coach last week or earlier this week, who was in Tuscaloosa with him for the official visit. He said that he plans on making a decision within a week or two after that final visit. So I think Alabama's done a good job there. We'll see how the Michigan visit goes and go from there.
Yeah. So we appreciate everyone for tuning in again. We participating doing this show on Thursday, kind of finalized the visitors list late last night. So we did it on Friday.
What's the main thing you're looking for this weekend, Tim, out of these visits or even some visits elsewhere?
I am keeping an eye on some of these guys because, Bama brought in a lot of their top in-state guys on the last weekend. I think it's Is June 20th the last weekend, or is there one more?
June 20th, yep.
So they bringing in Ced Morgan, Tank Jones, Xavier Kroll, Gibson, all those guys, Booker, commitments and stuff like that. So this is another big week. Next week's a little bit downsized, but 1, 2, and 4 are going to be huge. For me, I'm trying to see, like, can you get these guys to get on board before the end of June? Because we saw that run last year. That run went from Keelan to AK Deer in a 6-week window that was just Bama fans were like, in the roundtable, Andrew, Tim, give us a commitment today, and then it happened. It was like,
now they expect it every day.
and now they actually think they can cause that to happen. We have to deal with that. They're literally on the roundtable constantly going RPM. So I'm just looking to see how much ground they make. I'm really looking the most to see what happens with last week's class, because I think we're going to be basically, it's like a paycheck and a new job. You're 1 week behind. So I think Alabama, we know what the visit reviews are going to be. This staff does a great job with that. But I'm still looking to see, for me, what's happening with Jet when he comes out of Oregon. Titan Davis could show up at Michigan. There's a lot of things we're still looking on. It's Friday, and the world is our oyster. What about you?
Yeah, I think certainly, looking to see if Alabama is able to get anybody on board. Who comes out of this weekend? Because we saw some guys last weekend. Nolan Wilson had already named Alabama his favorite before the weekend. Then you had Bryson Cooley announce Bama as his leader. You had the good news from Jet Washington. Malachi Lee, great visit there. So, which guy that Alabama's potentially trailing for right now does Alabama make a big move with? Over the course of the weekend, because they do such a great job on these official visit weekends, but it's also hard not to have a great time on the trips. And then I think secondly, as you mentioned, visits elsewhere. For me, I'm kind of watching a few of these Alabama commitments that are taking official visits. Zion Gibson, Chris Booker, who are both going to be in Oxford this weekend. Now, Ole Miss isn't necessarily seen as a major threat right now for either one of those guys. But when they come out of the weekend, what are they going to say? I think the good thing is both of them will be in Tuscaloosa on that January 20th weekend.
Well, that's it. Y'all can look for us, barring breaking news. Y'all can look for us next week, more than likely Tuesday, possibly Monday, depending on how things shake out. We'll have a review of this weekend and maybe a preview for the next weekend. And then towards the end of the week, we'll go over that. But again, get us with that like button. Andrew, give us that thumb sideways. Yes, y'all, you got a like for that thumb. Give us a like, subscribe, and please check us out on the roundtable. If you have questions, PM us, send us a private message. We're always there, and I'm glad to have you. Andrew?
Yeah, follow us at BamaOnLine.com throughout this entire weekend, because we'll have a lot of updates on the message board.
So it's already having them.
Already have updates. A lot of these, all the recruits arrived last night in town, so we've already got updates flowing on the roundtable. So go check that out.
Appreciate it, and everyone have a great and safe weekend, and we'll see you next week. Roll Tide. Say goodbye, Andrew.
Goodbye.